All right, let's see if we can do this. Okay, where do gods come from? That's the subject, and a lot of people have the view, sort of. I think this is the common view, and it's a sensible one that, gods came from us trying to explain nature, sort of feebly. But I don't think that's true. I think that's only true to a first order approximation, and really that's not what's happened at all. Because, okay, for example, let's take the god Poseidon, personification of the sea, to the first order approximation. Well, what did we really deify? Did we take the ocean and deify it, actually? I mean, that would be pretty hard to do, considering we didn't even understand the ocean per se, not as material reality. We had an idea of it, but I'm not sure how you could promote that. And if you did, promote it in itself, then it would be a theory you'd work on and whatnot. I think instead what's happened is that human beings put themselves in a mind frame, as if they were the ocean, and how would the ocean think, based on the way the ocean behaves, and what would its personality be, and all of this. And they deified that. In other words, they deified not the ocean, but they deified their idea of the ocean. And that's what's going on there. Same, another example, say you're thinking about war. Maybe you know a lot about war. Maybe you've been to war, and you know of the attitude that you have to take on in order to fight war. That attitude is what you're deifying in, the god Mars. It's not war. Now, it seems right to a first approximation because our brain is evolved to understand the material reality, or at least to comprehend and form ideas about it. And so, when you describe what's going on in there, you immediately get back to the real world. But this is the kind of thing why I emphasize that when people talk about reality, they're talking about their model of reality, generally, and not material reality. Again, in the more general case, just think about it this way: as a materialist, as an issue of materialism, everything comes from some material cause, every idea, even a wrong idea, like, oh, the sun rises. Yeah, but there's a material cause, and it all works out, and we understand why, the sun doesn't actually rise, but it appears so. There's always something like this. Take a unicorn. Doesn't exist. Well, it didn't come from a void. Unicorns look a lot like horses. It's fairly easy to see where the parts of the uniform came from material reality. But how the hell would you ever get a metaphysical idea? Because the metaphysics doesn't interact with the physics. So where in the hell do you come up with a theory about things that don't actually impact the physical world? How would you get that information? And, to me, I think it's fairly obvious. What was deified in metaphysics, the whole idea of metaphysics, is not trying to understand the world or the universe. It's trying to understand thought. That's what seemed ephemeral. That's what seemed like ghosts. That's what seemed like, even though we experienced it, that it was somehow metaphysical. It was our ideas, and we had no way to explain that. That was the confusing part. Everything in our world is so tangible, and yet we can have this intangible thing like a ghost in a room that I see and you don't see, and we didn't have good explanations for that. And the metaphysics is where we take our mental world and we pretend it's some other world that's behind everything. And that's what Plato was deifying in his theory of forms. Ideas. He was saying, they aren't just ideas, they're these perfect things. And they exist in this other perfect realm. And it's all the deification of the human thought process. In metaphysics, deification of the human thought process. And that's why we can have metaphysics, and people say, well, they know it's true because God spoke to them. But when you ask them, well, I'd like to speak to God, they're like, no, you can't do that. It's you'll never, it's beyond our comprehension. And yet this person has had a relationship with God and has comprehended it. And, so the theists are pretty confused about, how metaphysics can serve them. They use it in a very convenient way. And the fact is, all metaphysics is just a deification. I think this is the fact, is just deification of a human thought process. That's where gods came from. Gods came not explaining reality, but explaining our ideas about reality. We could sense, in a way, that our idea of the ocean was separate from the ocean itself, but also related. So we deified our idea into a god as a way of trying to get our idea back out into the real world. And since it was an idea and was sort of in this dream world, that's our metaphor for metaphysics. And you see it alive today in people that are past theism. The question of, is life a dream? It's like, well, if it is a dream, it's totally different from a sleeping dream. What would it even mean? Oh, it would mean that the world is like a mental space. That's what it would mean, because it'd be a very different dream than the kind you have when you sleep. What would be the similarity? Well, that's using dream as a metaphor for reality, and it's basically saying that the reality would be more like a mental space than it would be like this material space that we currently mostly think that it is. So yeah, this is the kind of reason that I focus on pointing out that people, when they speak about material reality, they think more often they're speaking about their model of reality. They're talking about their deductions and the things that they've drawn from the material facts that they've gathered. And to me, that's where gods come from. They are deifications of human thoughts. They're not deifications of nature. They're not explanations of nature. We formed an idea about nature. We had this idea, and then we deified that idea. This wasn't an attempt to explain. It was an attempt maybe to identify and give something a name. But in the end, what we did is we formed an idea, and then we tried to make that idea central to the world by promoting it into a metaphysics.